Hello and welcome, it's Neil Dougan here. I'm the founder of TRIM, and we're looking at the subject now of water. So we're looking at the water of the body and indeed the way that our whole being actually approaches water. So we're looking at the philosophical approach that we actually have to water. Now we're going to talk a lot about, we're going to talk about the issues surrounding abundance and scarcity, which are incredibly important in terms of the way that our thoughts and our mind is actually approaching the subject of water. And we're also going to be talking about the purity and the context of how water can actually be utilised within the system to quench and to dilute and these types of matters. With all of this, we're really dealing with at a biological level, we're actually dealing with the fear that the body has, even right down to the level of the cell, the fear that exists about having enough of the right kind of water. And indeed, when we're talking about the right kind of water, does it actually have the right salt balances and other components within it? So we need to consider the idea of scarcity of water. So when we're thirsty, we know that we're in trouble, and if we get very thirsty, well, we know that we're dying. So it's amazingly important to make sure that we do keep enough hydration within our systems. And of course, in our modern world, people are very aware of this. You see people walking down the street carrying water bottles with them. However, this has a much deeper biological underpinning, if you like. And when we consider the organism, so we can talk about humans or animals or even plants, the threat of the lack of water becomes an incredible stress. So the fears around there not being enough water can impact on it in a tremendous number of ways. So the first one is the dehydration that we've already just been talking about, but equally, there is the fear from a biological perspective of the lack of water from fire. So we're talking about drought, fire, and the consequent problems that actually come from it. What I'm seeing clinically is that people actually have these kinds of fears and all of these types of issues actually descending right down into their being, so that their cells are behaving in relationship to the perceived fear or the perceived threat of indeed drought, severe drought situations where you've got thirst, and even more graphically when this happens, you get the fear of fire actually occurring within a person. Another complication of this is toxicity. So where you have water that becomes, or a water supply for example, it becomes very reduced in its quantity. So we think about a stream that's drying up, a stream bed or a river that's drying up, the quality of the water degrades. This kind of fear of that degrading nature of the water also can become embedded within our systems, and our bodies will respond to it in quite dramatic ways, that actual fear of toxicity. I'm going to talk more about that when I'm doing the science video on the subject of water, but for now it's just enough to understand that the body can be very, very frightened of toxicity. So this then it gets expressed in the way that our body, our cells within our body actually perceive the threat of toxicity within themselves. So really what we're dealing with here is, on the one hand we're dealing with scarcity, and on the other hand we're dealing with abundance. And people often ask me the question, is it possible to have too much hydration? Is it possible to drink too much water? Well, an overabundance of anything is just as difficult for the body to manage as an scarcity, like just not enough of it being available. However, one thing for absolutely certain is that the consciousness of abundance or the consciousness of scarcity, depending on which is playing out within you, and it depends on the fear systems that are operating within you and the belief systems and the habits and the patterns and so on, depending on which ones are actually prevalent at the time, then your body will be responding either from scarcity or it will be responding from abundance. And, as I mentioned earlier there, the way that the body actually holds on to water will have a dramatic impact on your weight. Another concept in here that bears thinking about is this idea of sweetness. So people will talk about drinking from a mountain stream or something like this, and they'll say the water is incredibly sweet. And there's this concept of sweetness. And what it really relates to is acidity. And once again, the body will perceive what it's getting in the way of food. So we're talking about what it's drinking and eating. And it's going to look to this sort of sweetness, which is really the acidity nature of the water. And once again, your body will actually respond to this perceived nature of actually the food that you're drinking or the water that you're drinking. So it's this nature of sweetness of the available water within the system. Another aspect here is the concept of turgidity, or is the water moving? And once again, you know, we as biological animals, as we are as humans, we would be very suspicious if we saw a river or a creek or a well or something like that that was stagnant. So there's that idea of stagnant or standing water, and we know, you know, inside ourselves, in our being, we know that moving water is much more likely to be wholesome for us than this turgid or dank or stagnant type of water. Now, once again, when you get that type of consciousness actually sitting within the body, then your body responds to the water of the body according to that. And if it feels at all as though the water of the body has become stagnant or it's become turgid, well then all manner of biological processes will become compromised. So the last issue I want to talk about, which relates to the kind of fears that we might have around water, is the concept of heavy water. Now, when I talk about heavy water, you may or may not, you know, it might just sort of jump into your mind some of these ideas, and maybe it won't, but the common use for the term heavy water is in the nuclear industry. So where they're creating, you know, nuclear power plants and so on and so forth, they use the so-called heavy water within it. This you know, since the atom bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and so on, in our consciousness we have this awareness of this idea of heavy water, and it's a dangerous thing. And so our very ideas, our very concepts around water have become compromised to the extent that we become fearful of the water. Interestingly, from a clinical perspective, I've seen cases of people where you know, the naturally occurring heavy water within the system is actually misinterpreted as being this sort of dangerous, you know, it's nuclear, it's all to do with nuclear stuff. Of course, it's a naturally occurring thing, and we shouldn't be having these fears. So all the things we've been talking about here today, you know, there's a natural progression between you know, drought and flood, and somewhere in between is the place which is actually healthy for our bodies to be operating. And indeed, what we're looking for is for our water, the water within our body to be perceived as actually being healthy water. We're looking for it to be in that category of healthy water. Okay, so that's the end of what I wanted to talk to you about with regard to water and as it impacts on the healthy weight processes around trim. So I'm sure you find that useful. The next video will be much more based on the actual science and, you know, the scientific matters that are actually being approached within trim. So have a look at that, and I look forward to your feedback on the trim Facebook page. Thank you.